It began like so many stories do, with quiet hope. A black man, father of two, husband, and federal judge, had just moved his family into a suburban neighborhood that promised peace, safety, and the kind of dignity he'd spent his life working to earn. The house wasn't just bricks and beams. It was a symbol, a culmination of years spent navigating courtrooms, enduring coded slights, and rising through a system that wasn't built for men like him. It was the American dream, finally realized. But for one woman on the Homeowners Association board, it was a threat. She was known in the neighborhood as Karen, a name that had come to symbolize entitlement, prejudice, and unchecked power. She wore her authority like armor, wielding HOA rules as weapons. From the moment the judge's family moved in, she made her presence felt. Petty fines for lawn height, complaints about the color of their shutters, notes slipped into the mailbox about neighborhood standards. It was harassment dressed in bureaucracy. But the judge, ever composed, chose dignity over confrontation. He believed in the system. He believed in justice. And he believed that if he kept his head down, the storm would pass. It didn't. One night, while the family slept, flames erupted from the garage. Within minutes, the fire had consumed the home. Neighbors watched in horror as smoke billowed into the sky. Sirens pierced the quiet, and the judge stood barefoot on the lawn, clutching his children, watching everything he'd built turn to ash. Investigators found gas cans behind the property, fingerprints, surveillance footage, and a witness, an elderly neighbor who had seen Karen pacing near the house earlier that evening, muttering about people who don't belong. The evidence was damning, but what followed was even more surreal. 1 week later, in a courtroom downtown, the judge took his seat behind the bench. His robe, crisp and black, hung heavy with the weight of recent days. He had barely slept. His children were staying with relatives. His wife, still shaken, had begged him to take time off, but he refused. Justice, he said, doesn't pause for grief. The docket was full. Cases moved swiftly. And then, as if scripted by fate, she walked in. Karen. She was there for a separate matter, an HOA dispute with another resident. She strutted into the courtroom, confident, smug, unaware. She didn't recognize him at first, not without the suit, the tie, the suburban backdrop. But when she did, her face drained of color. Her eyes widened. And for the first time, she was silent. The judge didn't flinch. He didn't speak of the fire. He didn't mention the ashes still clinging to his skin. He simply presided. Professional. Measured. But the room felt different. Charged. Every word he spoke carried the weight of a man who had seen justice denied and was now its vessel. Later that week, the arson case came to trial. He recused himself, of course, but the courtroom was packed. The community, once indifferent, now watched with bated breath. The prosecution laid out the facts: the gas cans, the fingerprints, the footage, the motive. Karen's defense crumbled. Her arrogance, once her shield, became her undoing. She had bragged at an HOA meeting claiming they'll never prove it, but they did. The verdict was swift. Guilty. As she was led away in handcuffs, the judge stood in the back of the courtroom, not as a jurist, not as a victim, but as a man who had endured, who had refused to be broken, and who had let the system speak for itself. His children were there too, watching, learning, seeing that dignity isn't weakness, and that justice, though delayed, is never denied. The story spread. News outlets picked it up. Social media buzzed. But for the judge, it wasn't about headlines. It was about healing, about rebuilding, about showing his children that even when the world tries to erase you, you can still rise. Neighbors who had once looked away now offered help. Meals, clothing, a place to stay. The community, shaken from its apathy, began to reckon with its silence. And slowly, the judge's family began to rebuild, not just their home, but their faith in people. This wasn't just a story of arson. It was a story of power, of how prejudice hides behind rules, of how dignity can be mistaken for weakness, and of how, in the face of hatred, a man chose not revenge, but resolution. He could have shouted, he could have raged, but instead, he let the truth speak. He let the evidence speak. And in doing so, he reminded everyone watching that justice isn't loud. It's steady. There's a moment, near the end of the trial, that still lingers. Karen, seated at the defense table, turned to look at the judge. Her eyes pleaded, not for forgiveness, but for understanding. As if she couldn't fathom how the man she tried to destroy had become the one to hold her fate. But he didn't meet her gaze. He looked forward, toward the future, toward the life he would rebuild. And in that silence, there was power. This story isn't just about one man. It's about every black family who's been told they don't belong. Every homeowner who's faced coded threats. Every child who's watched their parents endure with grace. It's a reminder that the fight for dignity is ongoing, and that sometimes the most powerful act of resistance is simply standing tall. The judge's house may have burned, but his legacy didn't. His story, now etched into the fabric of justice, will live on. Not as a tale of victimhood, but as a testament to courage. And for those who watched, who listened, who learned, may it serve as a call to speak, to act, to never let silence be complicity, because dignity, once ignited, cannot be extinguished.